So welcome to the children's literature during Reading Africa Week. I'm Jessica Powers. I'm the publisher at Catalyst Press, and I'm going to introduce the panelists and the moderator, and then turn it over to the moderator. So the moderator is Bumi Eminanjo. Bumi is the founder of Atlas Book Club, a subscription book club that shares kids' books from around the globe and materials relevant to the culture of a country featured in the book. From Bumi's welcome letter on the Atlas Book Club website, quote, "What started as a family book club focused on African countries grew into an exploration of different cultures and countries from around the world. I witnessed how my children and others who participated in the book club connected with the different cultures through the selected books. I became even more passionate about sharing this transformative experience with kids nationwide." So we're really thrilled to have Bumi moderating. She's sort of perfect for this. Our panelists include Akiwe Ire. Akiwe is the author of Idea of the Benin Kingdom and founder of Our Ancestries, a publishing and education company dedicated to sharing stories on pre-colonial African legends and providing engaging activities for kids to explore specific African cultures. Hannes Barnard, a South African-born author of both English and Afrikaans novels. He debuted in 2019 with the YA novel, and I'm gonna butcher the Afrikaans pronunciation, Hannes, sorry. Haley Se Comet, which he translated into English as Haley's Comet. In 2020, Volk, his apocalyptic YA adventure, was released, and coming up in 2022 is his crime novel, Die Wet van Hatang. I am sure I butchered that, sorry. Ruth Ahmedzai Kemp, a literary translator primarily of children's book, working from German, Russian, and Arabic into English. She has translated 28 books, including fiction and nonfiction from Germany, Jordan, Morocco, Palestine, Russia, Switzerland, and Syria. And she is also co-editor of the World KidLit blog. And I want to mention that this panel is co-sponsored by the World KidLit blog, and we're really thrilled to have them on board, or fully sponsored by the World KidLit blog, and we're really thrilled to have them on board on Reading Africa Week. Caroline Kurtz, our last panelist, from the age of 5. Caroline grew up in Ethiopia, the child of Presbyterian Church missionaries. The family lived in the church's most remote mission station in the mountainous regions of southwestern Ethiopia near the town of Maji. As an adult, she and her husband returned to the continent as teachers to work with war refugees in Ethiopia, Kenya, and South Sudan. Her experiences were detailed in the memoirs A Road Called Down on Both Sides and Today is Tomorrow, both published by Catalyst Press. With her sister Jane, she founded Ready, Set, Go Books for early Ethiopian readers. Ready, Set, Go has now printed and distributed 70,000 books in Ethiopia. So welcome everybody, and I am going to turn it over to Bumi.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome everyone. I am really excited to be moderating this panel. I am Nigerian American, so and African lit is my favorite genre. I mean, I guess I am a little bit biased, but it's my absolute favorite genre. So to be here to moderate this panel and talk about children's books, African children's books, is just something I'm really looking forward to. So let's just jump right in. And let's start with this notion that is out there in the world, and so the confusion that people have who are not, very familiar with African stories, and this whole, African is not a country, Africa is a continent, right? And so expanding on that, I want to highlight a TED Talk by Chimamanda Adichie, who I'm sure a lot of you on here know, where she talks about the danger of a single story. And what she says about that, she says, the reason single story narratives are dangerous is because they portray this presumption that that is the only story about a particular country, about a particular culture. And so that being said, I think all of you in the work that you do in some way shatter that single story about African stories and African narratives. So to each of you on the panel, and I'll start, let's see, I'll start on my left as it appears on my screen. How does the work that you do, how does it shatter that single story narrative about Africa? And I'll start with Harnias.
Thank you very much. Thanks for everyone listening and watching tonight or this afternoon in the States. Appreciate you tuning in. For me, yes, it's an interesting concept, the single story narrative, because as a continent, we're so diverse, so many stories. We're a storytelling continent, and there are so many stories written and not written, unwritten, that are begging to come out. So from my own perspective, yeah, I write from a South African perspective because that's what I know. And my book, Halley's Comet, is a book that is set in apartheid South Africa. And of course, a lot of things have been written about apartheid. So there's quite often you'd find that there's a freedom fighting protagonist or an anti-hero even, and that is the narrative that it quite often follows. What I try to do is just to go back to normal people, just to have a story about very normal people living in normal circumstances and tell their story, because that's relatable. And it's also what I care about. Not all of us become Nelson Mandela, or not all of us can lead a million-man march. But all of us are confronted with situations, and we have the relationships that we work on. So that's how I think I challenged it, in a way that I took the setting of apartheid South Africa and a historic novel in a sense, and I wrote about a very normal guy who's interested in sports and girls and people he didn't know, but who he later meets in the novel, who are just as normal as him, but they come from different cultures and different backgrounds. And in the system that they live in, they're not supposed to be friends. So I took I took a small story, if you like, and I put it in a big context. And nobody's marching to the capital, nobody's burning down, buildings, but in their own small way, they are changed. They are changed. And I think that's how I'm just confronting or challenging the narrative, that it's not just the big stories or, everybody's a freedom fighter. Sometimes it's more of a change of heart, and that has a more lasting and a bigger ripple effect if that is multiplied in various areas. So I think, hopefully that answers your question. That's how I challenge it. I like stories about normal people, just people we all know, we can all relate to, and that's to me is interesting, because there's a lot of more normal people out there than Euros, if you like.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And those are my favorite types of books that just show regular people just being regular. There's a lot of magic and beauty in the ordinary, right? And so those are my kind of favorite books too. And I think when it comes to children's books, those types of books where you show just regular African kids just going on an adventure and hanging out with friends, getting up to mischief. What I found in my experience running this book club for the past 2 years is those are the kinds of books that resonate with kids the most as well, because they can relate, right? And that's why books like Captain Underpants and Dogman is so popular with kids, because they're just reading about other regular kids being up to like naughty adventures. So Caroline, what about you? How does the work that you do shatter that single story narrative?
Well, the work that my sister and I are doing with Ready, Set, Go Books is a little bit different, in that my sister's brilliant idea that she roped me into collaborating with her on was to start writing easy to read books for Ethiopian children. There is no such thing. There's very, very, very little printed for Ethiopian children. So they're in school learning to read a very difficult alphabet with really no interesting reading material. The whole children's literature thing that we're so used to here in the States just really doesn't exist. So illustrations was a big piece of what we were doing, having pictures in the book, not just words. We've gone on to we write in English because we are native English speakers. We have Ethiopian authors now who have joined us. We have many, many people donating their stories to be created into these easy reader bilingual books for young readers in Ethiopia. But we've worked on getting them translated into various languages of Ethiopia. Excuse me. So for one thing, anybody who checks in on our books will see that they are translated in 7 or 8 languages. So they begin to represent the diversity of Ethiopia in particular. We've done lots of themes. We've had Ethiopian sayings where we make up a little Aesop's fable kind of story to go with a saying that Ethiopian children hear. We've focused on Ethiopian parks and endemic birds and trees and plants and the flora and fauna of Ethiopia and historic cities of Ethiopia. So trying to let Ethiopian children see their own lives. And we try to be very careful, and we have Ethiopian advisors both for the text and for the pictures to be culturally appropriate so that children are going to see their own lives reflected. And we found that actually the Ethiopian diaspora throughout the United States and Europe is snapping these books up off of Amazon where they're on demand. And so the publishing and distribution in Ethiopia is one piece of it, but we also promote them to our friends and family and anybody interested so that children in more the American culture of white folks and white families can use these as early readers for their children as well. So it's ended up having a lot of different fingers and hopefully showing people the fascinating diversity of one African country, Ethiopia.
Yeah, I love that. And even just from what you said and what I'm hearing is you are actually shattering single stories by showing nature, by writing a book set in Africa and showing the beauty of nature and its immediate surroundings. And that's not something that you see often in children's literature where, you know, just nature is highlighted in an African story. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And Ruth, I'm excited to hear what you have to say. Like, how does your work shatter that single story narrative?
Hi, so yeah, at World KidLit blog and throughout September, which is World KidLit Month, we just encourage a sheer wealth and variety of stories to be shared. And, you know, our publishing in the English-speaking world, we're lucky that we have, you know, so many writers, so many authors, but a lot of research, especially in the UK, has really shown just how little represented children of ethnic minorities are, or children of people of colour. And you know, in the UK, it's something like 33% of children will be from other backgrounds, and it's really such small percentages that are reflected in books. Now that is changing and that's improving, but we still need a lot more authentic representation. And at World KidLit, we're keen to show that it's not just about having more characters to sort of fill certain roles or tick any boxes. It's about authentic representation and representation of heritage and of links with other countries. I think is really lacking in our education system and lacking in sort of conversation. So we're really keen for kids, well, for schools and families to make more space for stories from other countries that show, you know, every kind of story, fantasy, magic, urban, love stories, crazy space stories, everything. But looking at that link to where stories are come from, what authors and illustrators' journeys have been, what a superpower it is to have a link to another heritage and to have another language and to have that link to stories from around the world, which we all deserve to have access to. So yeah, really, like, we go for diversity in all ways.
Yeah, no, that's great, because it's not just, and shattering single stories is even though we're here in Reading Africa Week, it's not just about African stories, right? It's about all cultures. Like, how do we, shatter those single story narratives about different cultures and countries, all over the world, and have kids know that, yes, there's so much diversity within one culture and within one country. So that is fantastic. Thank you. And Ekua, first of all, I love that book in the back, and I just love the work you're doing, just showing, the history of different African kingdoms. So tell us more about the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for your thoughts. And thank you, Catalyst Press and World KidLit, for having me today. And thank you to everyone who has joined us in the room. I am looking to diversify our thinking regarding African history. For those that are not on the continent, I am looking to change the thinking that African history or the history of Africans in the diaspora started with slavery, or for those on the continent, I'm looking to change the belief that our history started with colonialism, or colonialism made us better in any way, shape, or form. Another big one that I'm looking to demystify is that African history is too heavy for kids. I don't think that our history should be shut away until kids get to high school or to university to start deciphering what happened or why it happened. And so that's why I write my stories, and I write my stories to try to simplify our history in a way that kids can understand and relate with pre-colonial Africans. And in doing that, I don't just write books for kids, because I'm a mother as well. And I know with my kids, once they love a character, once they see a character, it turns into coloring pages and puzzles, and there's so much that goes with it. And so I try to bring more than just the book to every character that I am bringing forward. I bring workbooks, coloring pages, puzzles to these characters so the kids can fall in love with these characters. And to reduce that aha moment that happens to quite a lot of us when we turn 18 or 20 and start to read about African history, and we turn to the Reddit pages and the Facebook groups and we're like, they lied to us all this time. We don't have to do that. Like, kids can learn from a very young age and start to form their own opinions about not only themselves, but also about other cultures. You don't have to be African to learn about African history. And with my books, I'm trying to also show that Africa wasn't just kings and queens. We weren't only kings, queens, and warriors. We were architects, writers, policy makers. And so that's a narrative I'm looking to bust with my books. Thank you.
That is, listen, like, I get so excited, and I'm really excited to be, talking about books in this way, because it just feels very intentional, right? And so it's just really important that we have just different aspects of African history and African culture highlighted in this manner. And it just makes me very happy. So let's go on to the next question, right? So we all have, like, we all work to some extent in this publishing world, in this book world. And it sounds like from the responses that you've provided, you all publish books that are in different genres, or you work with books, for example, in Ruth's situation, you work with books and authors, who publish different genres. And so in my experience, what I've noticed is the children's books that are published set in Africa have a certain narrative. There are certain narratives that you see very often. For example, you see, oh, this is a story, it's a picture book, and it's set in this African village. It's like this, random African village. They don't even give you like a region of Africa. It drives me nuts. So you see a lot of those types of very stereotypical type of stories. How challenging is it? And then I'll start with Hannes. How challenging is it to publish an African story that's very different from what's out there? What is the kind of responses that you're getting from publishers? Are they eager to get different stories out there, or are they used to seeing a certain type of story and kind of want to stick with that formula?
Well, I'll start with talking about my own experience. When I first pitched Halley's Comet, this is a few years back, I actually wrote the story in English, translated it into Afrikaans, and then translated back into English. So it's a long story, but anyway, I pitched it to a few literary agents in England and in the States, and the general response I got was, it might be, I don't think they knew what to do with it. So it might be a bit too African, too South African, something like that. And so I think without giving it a real shot, and I think what I try to do in my writing, and I think this is how we challenge it, is to write stories that are relatable. And all of us have, let's say, for instance, when we talk about friendships, love, parent-child relationships, all of those relationships are relevant and things you can relate to. So forget about it to a degree for someone who's resistant to this. Forget about the setting or whatever. There are actual things you can relate to, because relationships might be, they might be slightly seeing it from a different angle, but it's still a love relationship. It's still a friendship relationship. It's still a father-daughter relationship, or whatever it might be. So if we can convince the publishers out there to relate how relatable it actually is, because we're all humans. We just live in different circumstances, and we all share emotions. It's just the angle that we look at it, and our upbringing, our background, our cultural heritage, all of that brings a new sort of angle to it. And that's actually exciting, because rather than just looking at the same type of love story, you can now look at a nice African love story set in Zambia. I mean, and it's not something we see every day. So it just brings a new, nice angle. But as long as we write about elements that are relatable, I think it can be accessible to anyone. That's...
No, I completely agree. So we've launched Atlas Book Club in 2019, and since launching, we've explored about 27 countries. So for all over the world, and I read every book that goes into the boxes. And so I just want to reiterate what you said, like, we're all human at the end of the day. Behind all the stories, human stories, right? And what I've found out is we are all more alike than we're different. And so you can find, for the most part, something about a character that really resonates with you, even though you live in opposite sides of the world and look nothing like each other, right? So that's a very good point. Thank you. What are you self-published, or do you go through a traditional publisher?
I am self-published, but I have had some feedback regarding my books in that, because that are challenging, because I'm trying to narrate African history or African culture in a way that's true to the culture. For instance, my Idia book, Idia is very famous. Her mask is known all over the world. And one of the most signifying aspects of her mask is that she has two big marks on her forehead, and it is not Idia without those tribal marks. And I was told by many to remove that aspect from my book because it wasn't, it didn't relate to sensibilities regarding tribal marks. However, tribal marks are a big part of African culture. They are similar to tattoos over here in this part of the world. And I just, as an African, did not understand why tribal marks were not acceptable when tattoos are. So that is one of the challenges that I have when writing my books and trying to keep them consistent to the culture, is that you're selling a culture to another culture that isn't too familiar with the reason why Africans do the things we do. It's all based off of our history and our culture. There's a reason to all of this. So that is a challenge. And sometimes I've been encouraged to move away from the truth of the story to make the stories a bit more generic. For instance, with Idia, she does have a very, it's a notable relationship in my story about her that she has with her dad. And I was advised to not talk too much about Idia or the fact that she became a warrior, but focus on her dad and how she and her dad were really great and make that the story. But I say, well, there are lots of stories about female characters and their fathers. There are not too many stories about Idia of the Benin Kingdom. And I want to tell the story about Queen Idia. So that's a challenge that I do have sometimes with writing these books, in that staying true to the character and staying true to the culture is a fine balance.
Yeah, gosh, I appreciate you giving that context, because especially when you talked about tribal markings, and we're both Nigerian, and my grandmother, she's from Ondo State, and so she has this tribal markings that go from here, or had, she passed away, many years ago, had tribal markings go from here to here. And, that's just who she is. And that's just, our culture. And so to give you a sense of what that looks like on this side as a reader, I'm going to show you the book that I picked as my favorite book. And we'll talk about our favorite books later, but I feel inclined to show you this now. So this book is Nana Akua Goes to School. I don't know if you've seen it, and it's about this grandma. It's a Ghanaian family set in the US, and the book is centered on our tribal markings. And I can tell you, we featured this in one of our Atlas boxes. When I saw this book, I legit got really, really emotional. And I'm getting goosebumps even thinking about it, because I'm 43 years old, and I had never seen a children's books that showcased an African woman with tribal marks. So, don't ever, and I know you won't, but, let, what outsiders who don't understand our culture, or publishers who don't understand, change that, because the impact you're having for readers is so powerful, because at the end of the day, there are kids out there who can see themselves and their families in those books. So thank you for sharing that. So I want to direct this next set of questions to Caroline and Ruth, right? And so you both are in the space where you come across, Ruth especially, you come across different books set, by different authors in different parts of the world. I know some of the voids that I've seen, and I'll talk about that soon, because I go looking for certain types of stories set in certain countries, and I just can't find any. What are some voids in representation of African stories that you've seen, Ruth, over the course of your work in children's literature?
Well, my real specialist area is Arabic, so I might start at the top of Africa and just think about about North Africa across from Morocco to Egypt. I think when we look at the stats of what gets translated, I mean, you might not be surprised that most translations, like a really big majority, like 70%, come from Europe and from European languages. But you'd think Arabic is quite a large number, large language. It's really shocking just how few books are actually translated. And there's some great examples from publishers from Morocco, but even a country as huge and populous with so many publishing houses and brilliant authors and illustrators as Egypt has had almost nothing translated for children in the last few years, in fact, ever. And so there's a real lack of literary agents and connections between the publishing houses and then UK and US and other English-speaking publishing houses. And so it sort of falls to translators and to advocates like us at World KidLit and Arab KidLit now to sort of plug these gaps and fill these, make these connections that just don't happen by themselves. There's a lot of work behind the scenes. But thinking more broadly about Africa, I mean, it's also no surprise that a lot of the authors and books that I'm seeing, it's from just a few countries. So it's from Nigeria, it's Ghana, Kenya, Uganda, South Africa, and it's brilliant and it's wonderful what is out there. But I always want a book from this country. I want a book, and and it's getting easier to find because there's ebooks. I have been surprised when I've tried to buy books from, or for example, Ghana, actually how easily I was able to buy things online. And so that is gradually changing, but yeah, there's huge gaps. And then in terms of genres, I would love to see more YA being published from books that have been published first in Africa, then coming to Europe. I'm seeing it more happening the other way. Like, for example, one book I'll probably talk about a lot, A Cutter Witch, or What Sunny's Were in the Flames, which was published in Nigeria by Cassava Press, but I believe it was published first in the US, or perhaps it was contemporaneous. But I would love to see more books that have been published first in Africa, then coming over to our shores. Or this sort of dual publishing happening at the same time in numerous territories. I think it's really, really exciting to see that happen. But I'm always looking for more YA. There's really not been as much as I'd like to see, and I'd love to see more historical fiction from other regions of Africa. I'm so excited, Akiwa, to see your books, and I'll also just show one example of something I've been really excited about lately, which is the Children of the Benin Kingdom by Dina Orji. And that's fantastic sort of historical fantasy, sort of like the Beast Quest series, which my kids have loved, great adventure. And I want to see more of this. I want to see historical fiction, fantasy for all the regions, for East Africa, I think publishers do go for what feels safe and what they feel like they know about already, or something what's perhaps meant, has got a bit of space in the school curriculum. They're like, oh, we can sell this book because that's a story people have heard of. But I think it falls to publishers to push beyond that and to provide the books that the context for us to broaden the curriculum and broaden those conversations that we have in history and geography and we need more.
No, that's great, because when you actually look at, because publishing, from the publisher's standpoint, it is a business, right? And so they want to sell books. And so if you think about it like that, you see the success of certain books like Children of Blood and Bone, for example, by Tomi. It's huge, and it's not a typical African story that would hear, but the success of that and other books, in that space, like Nnedi Okorafor, who wrote A Cutter Witch, and there's a lot of Afrofuturism and fantasy in African lit right now that's really hot. It's everywhere, actually, and but amazing diversity in the stories as well. And so hopefully the publishers kind of note that trend. I think they are, because you're seeing more of those books now, but hopefully that encourages authors to write their stories, no matter how unusual it may be and outside of the box. And so hopefully that happens. And Caroline, so when we were exploring Ethiopia with Atlas Book Club, I was pulling my hair out because I could not find hardly any children books set in Ethiopia. It was very, very frustrating. So, excuse me. What, if any, are the voids that you're noticing when it comes to book set in Ethiopia, as it pertains to not just the story, but now I want to talk about the diversity of stories within Ethiopia, like Ethiopian stories, and also within genres and age groups like YA, middle grade, picture books. What is out there? Because I'm sure there are plenty of Ethiopian parents looking for children's books for their kids who are pulling their hair out like me. What is out there as far as Ethiopia is concerned?
Well, I don't feel qualified to speak on a broader basis, but because I actually, other than these easy reader books, which I'm on the creative team, so I write some of them, but we have like 120 to 130 of these little easy reader bilingual books that are now translated. Most of them are translated into at least 4 languages. Many of them are translated into 7 or 8. And so my sister and my son and I are the creative team, and we do a lot of work on the text, and we also do a lot of work on the art, and then tweaking the art with the designer, because we have non-professionals in both who are contributing their work. So my sense of what's out there in English about Ethiopia has been marked more by becoming an adult, having my own kids. My sister, who I've mentioned several times, has published 37 books, and a bunch of them are set in Ethiopia. Unfortunately, some of them are out of print, but I will send you one if I have your address, that I bought several copies of, about a little boy in Addis Ababa, the capital, who is from a poor family, but his hobby is raising pigeons. And so the whole, and it's done by a lot of kids in Ethiopia. I know it won't help for your kids because it's out of print now, but I do want to comment a little bit on easy reader books as a genre.
Yes.
I mean, I haven't really thought of it before as a genre, but how many easy reader books are there set in Africa? I think it's probably a very small number, and they're mostly ours. The problem is that the easy reader category in the United States tries to use an extremely limited vocabulary of only words that are easy to decipher. So we kind of set out with that in mind, but in order to make these stories at all captivating, and something more than run, spot, run, we still look very carefully at the words we're using and try to use if there's an option for an easier to sound out word. But, you know, I'm sure for the classroom, we don't qualify in the easy reader category, but we're very strict to have lots of these books where there's 1 sentence per page, 1 sentence and a bright, colorful, interesting picture, so that young readers are enticed to give it a try.
So what age group are easy reader books? Just to clarify, just for folks who don't know, are these like early chapter books, early reader books, or are they, do they come before picture books?
These come, like, picture books are really built for adults to read to a child.
Yes.
There's complicated text and a fair amount of text on the page. That has changed now. Now you're seeing a lot of fantastic pictures with 1 word or something like that in picture books. But for a long time, picture books have been deeper stories with bigger vocabulary that an adult reads to a child. These are more like, these are almost a hybrid, because like I said, we cover history, we cover different styles of building houses in Ethiopia, different areas of Ethiopia build their house. So we have one on houses of Ethiopia, birds of Ethiopia, trees of Ethiopia. But like I said, a lot of them have 1 sentence per page, and that's a key to easy reading, where a child who's just learning to read and has a bunch of sight words and can sound out several harder words, or with an adult's help can look at the picture and kind of figure out what the word must be. It's that category of a child just getting a handle on reading. And children need to see their own lives in those kind of pictures, not just a teddy bear or a pig or a mouse, but but something that shows their life.
Yeah, that's such an interesting, like a very important category. You know, that newly independent reader, right? That's just making their way through books and just getting independent in their reading ability. And so to have those types of books set in an African country, I think that's great. What's your website? So where people can get those books? Well, what's your website?
Well, actually, you can go on Amazon. So
they're on Amazon. Okay.
They're on Amazon. So
Great.
Open Hearts. So my sister and son and I create the books, and then another nonprofit organization publishes them. And that nonprofit is called Open Hearts Big Dreams.
Open Hearts Big
so
Dreams. I'm sure someone will put it in the chat somewhere. Yeah. So there you go. That was
give you another example of something that we've discovered inadvertently. Early on, one of the things we did was to, I have this little hobby of collecting Ethiopian sayings. Mm-hmm. So of taking these little sayings and turning them into a little book. And it just was one of the ideas we had when we were starting out. Like Ethiopians love to say, little by little, the egg will walk. So we made a little story about a hen trying to hatch this egg and how long it took and how irritated and bored she got. And then finally, whoa, the egg hatched. And then it ends with little by little, the egg will walk. We discovered in the Ethiopian diaspora here in the United States, parents started saying to us, these sayings that are so precious to us as adults aren't familiar to our kids. Thank you for putting this into a book so that our kids, these sayings that are so cultural and express so much about how life unfolds, won't get lost the way they're getting lost.
Yeah. And so, you know, I think about that the same way I think about folktales, right? So folktales are such a big part of African culture and African just tradition. And so I kind of want the perfect segue there to think about different genres in African stories. Folktales are some of my favorites, actually. So what trends have you noticed in African literature? And I'll start with Ekua. What trends have you noticed in African literature as it pertains to fantasy, historical fiction, YA? I'm sure, you know, Hannes can comment on the YA aspect of this. I've noticed a lot of folk tales being turned into picture books, which I absolutely love. But what have you noticed, Ekua?
That's what I've noticed as well, that a lot of our folk tales are being turned into picture books. I've also noticed a lot of African lived experience. Like there's this book, I don't remember the exact name, about the mosquito being turned into a picture book. Why does the mosquito buzz in my ear?
Yeah.
And when I saw that book, I said, oh my God, what a great book. Every single African would relate with this book. So simple lived that Africans experience being turned into picture books, as well as the folk tales. That's what I've noticed. I can't think of anything else aside from the usual historical fiction. That's about it. There's more work to do, apparently.
Hannes, like YA right now is exploding when it comes to African lit, right? You have, I mean, of course, the Children of Blood and Bone series, but, you know, there's so many other, especially from West Africa. I've noticed that there's Songs of Ruins and Wraiths, which is a fantastic book. I can't remember the name of the author. And you have a crime thriller coming out. So, you know, what trends have you noticed? And maybe it's just YA or maybe just African lit as a whole. What trends have you noticed?
Yes, I think I'll speak from a South African perspective. Obviously, like you say, YA is big right now. I mean, we're talking things like The Gilded Ones.
Yes.
Massive.
Yeah.
So, and that's awesome, because that's putting a spotlight on African YA, which is amazing, which is really needed, because what I see in South Africa is that we have a lot of amazing YA. And it's really an area that's grown significantly over the last few years. So I think, and this, I'm talking Afrikaans and English, and with the spotlight being placed on African YA, hopefully a lot of these will be translated, and then, if they're not in English, they'll be translated and they'll go worldwide, because it brings unique perspectives. It's nice stories, it's actually, and it's exceptionally well written. What I've also seen, I agree that, we also have in the younger children's market, there's a lot of true animal stories, or folk tales about animals and old legends, etc., that are quite big. And I think one aspect that is I think still needs to grow is like the fantasy market in South Africa, for the younger readers, YA and younger. I think definitely there's a conservatism in quite a lot of parents and some teachers, because they're afraid of their parents, that they're worried that there might be some sort of negative influences from fantasy connotation. But what's nice to see is we are seeing some fantasy titles coming through locally, and that's great. That market is slowly, it's a bit like graphic novels, the market is slowly sort of just appreciating it. And just in graphic novels, I mean, we have, and Jessica's the publisher, we have the Shaka Zulu series, which is just amazing.
Yes, it is.
And on Monday there was this, there we go, and it's incredible, because it's about an actual person. How amazing is that? And so we're seeing growth in various genres. I think there are aspects where we need growth still, like fantasy. I think that's definitely one that we can pick on.
Yeah. And so, you said something that I had never thought about before, the fact that there is some, I guess, African parents are a little bit conservative when it comes to fantasy novels, and growing up, because you have all this superstition that you grew up with, like mermaids are evil, and all these other things. And so I hadn't even thought about that. And it just, light bulb just went like, aha, maybe that's what it is. But YA definitely is doing well in the fantasy area. But middle grade, I would like to see more in middle grade, between that 9, 8, and 12 years old age category. I would really like to see more. I mean, Akata Witch, Nadia Carafo writes great middle grade novels, but that's the other thing that I want to get out there. Like, there are a lot of fantasy authors apart from Nadia Carafo. She's amazing, but there's more out there. And so I think there's a book coming out. I can't remember the name. It has a beautiful cover. It's a YA novel. I think like Song of the Sea or something. It's about a mermaid coming out soon. So it'd be nice to see, more of those stories. And so, Hannes, we'll stay with you. Let's talk about, translated children's literature, right? Because you do a lot of work translating between English and Afrikaans. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And if there's a trend out there I'm not very familiar with translated children's. So are there any trends out there that you've noticed when it comes to translated work? And then also a follow-up question, how do you make the decision? What's your process in deciding, okay, this is one I'm going to translate, or this is, one that this is a genre or age category that I want to translate? Tell us a little bit about that process.
Well, I'll tell you about what I know, and I know about the South African publishing industry. So in general, local authors, it's quite a strange thing. Local Afrikaans authors generally local English authors, because the English authors obviously compete with international titles. So that's quite challenging. But what we do see, and what our publishers are working very to commend them, because it's not always profitable, is that they are trying to translate, sort of, if there's a good Afrikaans story, they'll try and translate that into English. But another trend that we've seen locally is that, I mean, obviously we have lots of languages, like most African countries, we have lots of languages. We have 11 official languages. And we've traditionally seen that books in other, say Zulu or Xhosa or something like that, hasn't really sold well. They've been commercial failures. Because a lot of the say Xhosa speaking people wouldn't necessarily buy a Xhosa book because they, I'm just using that as an example, because they think, and Afrikaans people, it's across the board, they'll think it's better to get kids to read in English because that's the business language, that's the international language, etc. But there's a quite an exciting thing that's happening. There's a series called Tippy, and it's an early reader series. Started off in Afrikaans, and it's about this elephant, and it teaches kids to read. And it moved on to English, and now it's in isiXhosa, it's in isiZulu, and there's a buzz about it because it's not just translated, which is great about this. The isiZulu, the isiXhosa, that's written by native speakers who interpret the story as it's told in their own way, and in that way it's reaching beyond translation. It's retelling it from their perspective. So that's quite cool. We're seeing that, and there's a bit of a buzz. So what we're hoping is that buzz will permeate into the market, and we can see more translations from everywhere, and from all the languages in South Africa into other languages, so that the whole market and all the languages get a lot of airtime and are read more. So that's the one side of the publishing side. I'd love to translate all my books. I generally these days I write my books in Afrikaans because the market is better, but I would love to translate all of them into English because I would love them to be available. But it's a matter of time. It takes time to translate. It's hard work, fun, and I think if you're, because I'm in the fortunate position that I'm very comfortable with English and Afrikaans. I feel very comfortable in portraying a character in a certain way, and using language as a tool. But so for me, I would love to translate everything, but I think like Ruth is probably the better person to talk about.
I was going to go to her next.
Yeah, absolutely. So over to you, Ruth.
Yeah, Ruth. Just to confirm, Ashanta, I think we're done at 1:30, so I'm just keeping an eye on the time. Please let me know. Okay, we should wrap up soon. Okay, so we'll go to Ruth quickly on that question, and then we'll do a quick rapid fire situation, and then questions. So if you have questions, y'all, let's see. You can either put them in the chat box or raise your hand. So we'll take questions in a couple of minutes. But so I'll go to Ruth now.
I'll try to answer this question and the previous.
Okay.
To be quick, but just to showcase a couple of translations from Afrikaans. These are really wonderful books by Jacob Jacobs, and I think were probably chosen because about the story, it's sort of psychological, it's sort of issues, and the specific place is in the background. But as a mom reading them with my kids, what I love is those little specific details. And what you said earlier on, Bunmi, about how that's often lacking, that kind of specific geographical setting. I just wanted to pick up a couple of examples that actually are really rich in that and that I really love. So this is one that's translated.
Oh yeah.
And Claire, who I know is in the audience, will be cheering on because we're big fans of Ikisi. I've got all of them here. And I think when you were talking about sort of genres that are coming up more, I'm really pleased to see more books like this, and like Atinuki's Too Small Tola came out quite recently, that are just real life stories from the perspective of a 5-year-old girl or a 6-year-old girl, just like, but feisty, troublemaking, mischief, nothing out of the ordinary, but just really endearing, funny, gutsy, messy, and just that side of reality. But then in the background, you've also got that other place and that other culture, or that other, just that's not what the story's about, but it just happens to be there. And I think that adds that richness that, yeah, kids right from the beginning of their reading experience should have access to. So yeah, I'd love to see more books like that in translation. But yeah, as Hannes was saying, the barriers are so high. There's so many, the cost of translation means that publishers really have to have a book really sold to them. And it's not so much a question of what I choose or select for translation, because I don't have all the time in the world. It's more a case of being like a literary agent, having to sort of persuade and cajole publishers into taking something on. And yeah, there's often that resistance that, like, why would we translate a story from somewhere else? We've got that story already written by someone from US, UK. And it's always just challenging that. So we want to see other perspectives. We want to hear other voices. Kids, there's a thirst. And I think that is changing in the UK and US. There's more and more independent presses which are specifically looking for stories from other countries and in translation, and looking for diverse authors. So Lantana in the UK. Oh, I can't name them all. There's loads. Specifically
Tiny Owl Publishing is another one. Tiny Owl Publishing does a lot of translation. Yeah. So, question for you, Ruth. Aside from Arabic, what are some other languages that are under translated, that are not translated as much as some other ones?
Everything from outside of Europe. There's such a bias. And I would love to see so much more translated from Central Asia, from Asian languages, from South America. Even within Spanish, there's the stats that we've seen from Outside in World, which is a charity that has been collecting and promoting translated literature for over 10 years. And then the stats, we've worked with them and then added our own research, and we found there's so much more translated from mainland Spain, for example, than from Latin America, which makes no sense when you think it's so much closer to the US and there's so many more personal connections in South American countries. But yeah, I'm personally, like, beyond the languages that I'm interested in, I'm so keen to help forge collaborations and sort of partnerships to help translators, or people who don't see themselves as translators but are in a position to be able to co-translate from Central, from other African languages,
Awesome. Okay, so we have 2 minutes left. Caroline, if you can answer this in like 40 seconds. How do you address the fact? So this is a question from someone in the group. How do you address the fact that you're coming from a white missionary family in your memoir and writing about a culture to which you are not from, and the problematic stories published from the white savior missionary viewpoint? That's a loaded question for 40 seconds. You're muted.
Yeah, it wasn't going off. Yeah, it's a loaded issue. I'm writing my own experience. I'm writing with a tremendous love and hopefully sensitivity to the culture that I grew up in. And I have I had Ethiopians read the book before I published it and correct a lot of things. And I had fact checkers for the history that I included. And part of it is, I think, I mean, how do I address it? I address it by trying to take that humble point of view that I am an outsider and that I would have some misunderstandings and point to those misunderstandings and show my clay feet and show the clay feet of my parents as much as possible without demeaning myself or groveling in some way. It's a tricky balance.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to wrap up. We have 1 minute left. Thank you so much for having me, everyone. I'm going to wrap up with just rapid fire question. Just let's share what's your favorite book or what you're reading right now. And so I'll start with Hannes. What are you reading right now, and or what's your favorite book? Which is hard, but recently. What's your favorite book you've read recently?
Recently, well, currently on my Kindle is The Gilded Ones, the one we were talking about. Next in line is Black Diamond by Jake Da. And favorite book of theirs, a bit of a strange one. It's Jaco Jacobs, we spoke about earlier. Tussen die Lyne. So that's translated into Between the Lines. And it's like a middle grade book for to teach creative writing, but in a practical way. And it's just magnificent. It is awesome and should be translated. That's my pitch. There we go.
Thank you. Ekuiwa, title, quickly. Favorite book what you're reading right now?
I have so many. I just my husband. These are, I wouldn't say they're my favorite but I do love a lot of African kids lit. This is one of my favorites. Water Princess. This is another great one. Wangary's Trees of Peace. I love books that can tell a story, a very good story, but are also teaching kids about something in another part of the world, and books that create change as well. So those are the two that I have.
Caroline?
My favorite of our Ready, Set, Go book are one that I wrote about Maji, where I grew up.
Just title. Let's just get the title, and then Ruth.
Let's go to Maji. Take me to Maji.
Great. Ruth?
I'm going to cheat and show two because my best friend just had a baby, so I'm thinking about babies a lot. This is Alia and the Three Kids from Morocco, absolutely fantastic illustrator, and it's about these jealous cats who can't believe that their owner would dare to bring this weird baby into the house. And this one is absolutely gorgeous, from an author from Central African Republic, so translated from French, and it's all about African art and the fertility doll from Ghana, that region. Really beautiful book.
Thank you, everyone. 2 minutes over. I am sorry. That's it. It's been a pleasure hosting this panel. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you. Bye.